The Henry Ford in Dearborn will soon debut a new piece of history. The Jackson home opens June 12th inside Greenfield Village with a weekend-long block party. The home was a planning site for the 1965 Selma to Montgomery marches. Leaders, including Martin Luther King Jr., visited the home in Selma, Alabama, organizing the fight for voting rights.
Dr. Sullivan and his wife, Mrs. Richie Jean Sherritt Jackson, opened up the doors to their home in '65 for the movement towards voting rights in the United States. And so the work that they did in '65, really providing a place of respite, hospitality, a safe place for movement makers to lay their head. The Jacksons had been longtime friends with Reverend Dr. King since their wives were childhood friends. But they had also been an undercurrent of movement making all throughout Selma and really across the South, really starting in the early 1900s and leading up to a really more intense time in the 1960s. And so as the Jacksons became closer to understanding what was going on and how their role needed to play out, they decided that they would take a great personal risk, and that is welcoming Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. into their home, as well as other members of the movement. The Jacksons' home is one of many epicenters in the city of Selma and across the Alabama Black Belt of folks who took on great personal risks to make sure that all of us had access to the voting rights that are promised to us as American citizens.
The Henry Ford president and CEO, Patricia Mooradian, shares why Jackson's daughter reached out to the museum.
In February of 2022, Joanna approached us pretty much out of the blue and asked if she could explain to us why this house was so significant. And so she told us the importance of this house on a virtual call. She had this house in her own possession since her parents passed away, and she was trying to run it as a museum for about 10 years. And as she started to think about the future, the significance of this home, she was concerned about where it would end up, since she was an only child and she has no heirs of her own. And so she was looking for a place for the house to go and exist and be cared for in perpetuity. So she did a lot of research and a lot of homework. She knew that we had Greenfield Village, and that Greenfield Village was a place where we preserved and restored significant structures that tell stories that people can immerse themselves in. And so at the end of that call, she basically said, "Patricia, this house belongs in Greenfield Village." And that's when all our work began.
Amber Mitchell, the museum's curator of Black history, worked closely with Joanna Jackson throughout the project, hearing stories about her childhood home and the people who would visit.
I always sit in awe of Miss Joanna as I work with her, work in consultation with her, have gotten to know her very closely over the last several years over the course of this project, is, always understanding there is something new to learn. I think one of my favorite aspects of working with Miss Joanna is thinking about a person like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who, for me, is this big 3,000 foot tall figure. He's larger than life, right? But for her, that's her Uncle Martin, right? That's her Uncle Martin that shared cookies and bribed her with cookies and had tea parties with her and was really this human being. And so what I'm really excited to be able to bring out in this exhibition is the humanity of our movement makers, that these are not only just folks who took on a role that was necessary, but they were also parents, siblings, children themselves.
What was the process like of transporting the Jackson home from Selma to Dearborn?
The process of restoring this home, the process of deciding whether it could be moved, took us about 14 months from that call. We had to see if it was structurally sound, if it could withstand a move. Then we had to figure out how to move it. The house came with all of its contents, and those contents were significant. The family saved everything that Dr. Martin Luther King touched. The chair he sat in, the dining room table he ate in, the beds he slept in, the pajamas he wore. They saved it all. And so that was going to be moved with the house. What was determined is that the house, all the the extraneous parts, the roof, the chimney, the porch, would all be taken off so that it was down to a core box. That box of the home would be cut in half and basically wrapped and put onto a specially built cradle on the back of a wide load flatbed. And we took it up to Michigan in two trips. And then, of course, the roof and the chimney and the porch all went separately.
This is the Henry Ford's first major home acquisition in 40 years. Why was it so important to bring the Jackson home here to the museum?
The idea of moving a home or moving a building, it's not really best practice anymore as far as historic preservation goes. However, in our case, in working closely with Joanna Jackson, we realized that we had an opportunity to help preserve an important piece of American history, one that could potentially have been lost to environmental or financial or economic other outcomes. And so for us, it was critically important to not only just bring this home here, but to have it into perpetuity, meaning that forever, as long as the Henry Ford exists, that home will be taken care of and protected. I think as an organization, it was also really important for us to put our money where our mouth was in terms of preserving African American history. As curator of Black history, I started with this project, and it allows me to also dig into additional stories of African American history that touches all aspects of the Henry Ford's collections now, in the past, and in the future.
Mooradian and Mitchell also shared what the process was like of rebuilding the Jackson home and remodeling it, so that the house looks like the way it used to back in the 1960s.
We wanted to make sure that everything that was integral to that home, that basically the walls told a story. So we wanted everything to be preserved. And so it took a lot of care and historic structure specialists to know how to put it together in the most authentic way. The other thing, though, we had to think about was the fact that the home had been in Selma, Alabama, which has way different weather conditions than Michigan. So we had to make sure that it could withstand the winters here. And so we had to put in different kinds of heating and cooling systems, and also make sure that with the numbers of people that would be coming through the home, that the house would be sturdy enough to withstand repeated traffic through the house.
And then you have over 8,000 artifacts that you brought up from Selma that were in the house. What has it been like with you and your team going through those items and making the house look like it did in the 60s?
You know, it has been a real interesting project to take a home that had been lived in over 100 years. It's built in 1919. Designed by Wallace Rayfield, who is the second licensed Black architect in the United States. And it has 3 generations of Black teachers and Black dentists who live in this home. And so in doing the detective work to try and reverse that, right, to go from when we acquired it in 2023 to the way it looked in 1965 has been a real interesting labor of literal physical pulling up carpet, pulling off drywall to find the things up underneath and really do that sort of historical detective work, but also going through archives to see this very well documented and well photographed home that people don't know is this home, right? As far as the restoration of the home and pulling back these things, like we mentioned, the family hung on to everything. That was a priority for them. And honestly, I wish there were more folks who would hang on to everything that their family had. But it was a priority for them, so it made it a little bit easier for us to be able to have these really critical pieces like Dr. King's chair, the chair he was sitting in as they all watched the speech given on March 15th, 1965, the We Shall Overcome speech by LBJ. That's already there. All we have to do is make sure that it's conserved, make sure that it's stable enough to be out on the floor of the exhibition when it opens, right? But there are other smaller things that we also had to do some digging for, right? Where we had to find the correct television to make sure that that's historically accurate. We had to look for some of these smaller pieces that might have been lost to time, like some certain vases and other things that may have been gotten rid of. We also have worked very closely again with Joanna to get her own reminiscences about what was her mom's taste. What did she like? Her taste versus the previous owner's taste, very different, so that we can literally see in layers on the walls of the home who was living here and when, right? So that allows us to put together an awesome timeline and to be able to better understand what life was like for this family in particular, and what were the tastes of these ladies who lived in the home, who really left an imprint on not only just the family, but really the magnitude of the voting rights movement and the Voting Rights Act of '65.
Here's what's planned for the grand opening.
We're really excited about the grand opening because we're planning a 3-day block party in Greenfield Village. So the whole village will be celebrating the new addition of the Jackson home to Greenfield Village. So there will be musical performances, there will be a special marketplace by Black-owned businesses who will come in and share what they sell. We'll have all kinds of activities and sights and sounds. The house will be open. We will do a ribbon cutting launch on June 12th. And so we're pretty excited to welcome people to come to that, and then to enjoy the celebrations all weekend long.
Watch One Detroit, Thursday at 7:30 p.m. You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.